Hi, I'm Dean Bushmiller. We're going to talk about the CASP, and this is the course guide to get you ready for all the material that we're going to cover. Okay, why should you listen to me? Well, I have the CASP plus 21 other certifications, and I've taken, well, it's probably more than 60 certification tests. I have the CISSP, which is a related certification. I understand how certification works. I also, from a security standpoint, because that's the topic that we're talking about, I am a penetration tester and security consultant. I do that as my main job on a regular basis. I also have a pretty good understanding of security because I've written for Pen Test Magazine. I wrote a monthly column for them for the year of 2012. So what we're going to talk about is, where did all this stuff come from? How do I get the raw readings? What do the numbers mean? Because you're going to see some numbers on the courseware. What's the order of the course, and what about the exam? So where did all this information come from? Well, what happened about 10 years ago was that the U.S. military said, we need a way to figure out whether our people are qualified by third-party experts. They came up with this regulation called the DoD 8570. Inside of there, one of the top-level certifications, they have this IAT and IAM, there's this little box, and it says, for people who are very super secret and have to deal with lots of responsibility for security, they have to be IAM level 3, and we're going to put some certifications in there, and we're going to list them off, and one of them was the CISSP. Well, the people that were taking the exam in the military, because remember, this is about 4 million people in the U.S. military that are working on military arrangements and including support. They said, the CISSP exam really doesn't fit what we do because we're a little bit more technical in nature. And they also, a lot of people in the military were failing the exam over and over and over again because they were doing it the military way. Okay, so how do we solve this problem? Well, we come up with a different certification because we don't want to change the CISSP because that's a third-party validation. It's still relevant, it's still real, but what can we do as an intermediate step? So some U.S. military people got together along with a commercial entity called CompTIA, that's the people that put on the certification. They put it all together and they said, okay, this is what we need for a certification. This test accurately the capability at this level so that we know our systems are secure and that our people that are running on those systems understand that information. So this is kind of a reaction by the military, but also it's a maturity in the market. There are more and more open certifications, more vendor-neutral certifications out there, and there's more security certifications out there. Now, the U.S. military came up with a set of documents, and the govs came up with a set of documents that fit this. And what's really nice is that these documents are available to you. So if you need to do the deep reading, you don't like what I'm saying here and you want to go back to the source material, I'm going to point to it. So what they said was, hey, this certification, let's make something better. Okay, so how do you get the raw reading? Okay, there are 173 raw documents that are out there, and you can go and read those original documents. What I've done is I've taken the ones that are really, really specific to the exam, really important to you, and I've abstracted them and made them work for you. Those documents are called Special Publication 800 series. Sometimes they will also be from NIST. There will be something called a NIST, I think it's a NISTIR document, and that'll have a 4-digit number with it. All the special publications start off with SP 800-, and then it's usually a 2- or 3-digit number at that point. So you're going to see that in each one of my slides. Every time we start a new presentation, look down there and it'll say that. You go, well, Dean, this presentation on cryptography doesn't have it. That's because, for some reason, I thought that the material that they gave you and the material that I gave you should be a little bit different. You can still go look up those particular special publications, but what I say is, trust me on this because, like for instance for cryptography, I've been teaching it for a while and I know the core essential things that we're going to talk about. So in some cases when you don't see the NIST, know that you have to trust me as your instructor. Remember, there's 173 raw documents. Some of these are 200 and 300 pages long. If you want to reach out to them, that's fine. And also, if you want to talk to me, that's fine. And I'll be glad to talk about those special publications because some of them are a whole world into themselves. Okay, now what do the numbers mean? Every once in a while, you're going to see the numbers pop up on some of the slides. You'll see something at the top and it'll say something like 5.0 or 3.2. It'll be a whole series of dots. I've referenced the document at the beginning, the NIST special publication, and then when you want to go look up that special publication, you want to say, well, okay, where are you, Dean, in that special publication? Because if I say, hey, we're going to talk about confidentiality, and we're talking about NIST special publication 833, that could be anywhere in there. So you can get a frame of reference from that. So I left the numbers in so that you could dig deeper if you need to. What I will tell you is the course is sufficient, but the readings are there to support the particular course. Okay, what's the order of this course? Well, the answer is the order of this course is 50 topics arranged the best way that I can explain it to you. There isn't a perfect order to this course because a lot of these topics either overlap completely or have nothing to do with each other. For instance, physical security, well, we know we need physical security to start, but where does it fit and how does it fit with the other topics? Well, the problem is that the way that they organized it for the exam outline and the way that you learn it are probably different. So the course is ordered basically the way that I offer it to you here, and you'll see that list when you look inside the interface. Okay, what about the exam? The exam is 150 minutes long. You take it at a view-prometric location. My exam was 61 questions long. Some of the reports say that there's 83 questions. There are always scenarios. There's a bunch of them inside of the exam, and what I will say is that each one of your individual answers within the scenario counts as a piece of that question. So I don't know if the exam questions are weighted. They don't tell you that. They don't want to tell you that. And you also don't know how many you get right and how many you get wrong. You just get a pass. Like for instance, for me, I got a pass and it said, you did not get these areas correct, and they listed off the areas below. I looked at some of them and I said, well, I think I know that material, some of the material, okay, I go study more on it. And that's the nice thing for me is every place where it says after I pass, these are the things that you don't know, I go, okay, well, I've got to go back to the NIST special publications and learn a little bit more. If you fail the exam, it'll give you that list, and that's the list that you, again, go back and study a little bit harder. Now, I wanted to talk about the depth of the exam. And I need to give you an analogy here because I'm not going to tell you what's on the exam. If you send me an email, I'm not going to tell you. So, well, Dean, what about this? No, I'm not going to do that. Be a security professional. Have some pride in your work. And so here it is. So here's my example. We're going to say that the security concepts are A through N. So those are normal security concepts. One of those concepts would be C for confidentiality. One of them is A for availability. One of them is I for integrity. Let's just say that those are the only three concepts. There's a lot more. You're going to learn throughout this course, we're going to have 50 different sections, and you're going to learn probably about 100, 150 concepts that you're going to apply to security. Okay, for each one of those concepts, there is probably a threat. For instance, for confidentiality, one of the threats would be, for confidentiality, it would be disclosure, right? And there can be more than one threat, more than one way to attack confidentiality. So you don't have to know one threat against a particular concept. You have to know the majority of the normal threats against that particular concept. Then there are the controls. How do we protect ourselves? So each one of those tools that we use, for instance, for confidentiality, one of the controls that you would use would be encryption, right? Now there are more than just one set of controls that will solve one particular problem. Some controls can solve a whole host of threats that are out there. So the general depth of the exam is that we've got threats and controls. It's kind of like a threats and controls game. Now, let's actually apply this in the exam, and let me give you an understanding of how the exam would work. So, on the left-hand side, given this security requirements set, so they're going to say, here's the requirements that you have to choose. And they're not going to say it that way. They're going to say, a developer on a particular day was trying to do things that would work well for the long-term health and welfare of the company. And then you go, okay, developer, software development, SDLC, security and SDLC. He's a developer. This is his focus on particular things. It's not that focus over there. He should have a focus on security, but maybe he doesn't. Okay, I got it. SDLC is the thing, and he's working with a web application. So given this set of security, here we have these requirements, and this set of controls. So they're going to give you E, H, K, and J, those controls. And this set of threats, B, C, D, and E. Okay, so you got the requirements, controls, threats. In this instance, choose the best set of controls. And then they'll give you options A through D. And you'll notice that the options could be really similar. I mean, they could be really, really close together. You'll notice that A, B, and C all have the E control, and D doesn't. Well, is that critical, or is that just a dodge here? You know, you'll notice that on A and B, that there's a difference between them. They have in common C, D, and E, but the B and the A are different. You have to say, of the controls offered me, how do I address the threats, and how do I address the security requirements within this context here? And then you have to zoom out and you have to say, of these things, which is the most important for security? Because it may be that this person has a very narrow focus on security, and we need to adjust their thought when it comes to threats and controls. Sometimes it might just be as simple as this kind of threat is fixed by this particular control. Sometimes it can be as complicated as this. This is the quality of the depth of the exam questions that you're going to run into over and over and over again over those 61 questions. Now, I'm a pretty quick exam test taker. I was given 150 minutes. When I took, for instance, when I took the cloud certification, they gave 90 minutes for 60 questions, and I took like 25 minutes to do the exam. This exam, I only had about 30 minutes left. So you really have to be tuned up. So out of that 150 minutes, I used most of it in order to answer 61 questions. Okay, so to summarize, this exam is all about, can you remember the controls that address a particular threat? Can you choose the best control based on this particular threat? Can you remember what the threat looks like? Okay, what are the components of that threat? Can you configure the control correctly to address the threat given the situation? Now, a lot of times on the exam, they come up with an interface for you to work with. What I would say is tools are a plus, but when you're doing a scenario, you can pretty much click around inside the interface and see, oh, okay, this is what they're asking me to do. They want me to change this to that or this to that. Those tools, if you have a knowledge of those tools, like Cisco router configurations or Snort intrusion detection systems or Nmap, if you actually knew how to run that interface, it would make you go faster. You probably, if you had a background in ACLs, you'd probably know a lot of stuff. So remember, that's one little tiny component, ACLs. So this exam is all about you understanding security.